once you have your clay tile all made and you've drawn your designs onto it, it's time to start on our next step. Now, yesterday, like I said, peel the clay off the bag, put your hand on top of it, flip it over on the inside, and then you can pull out your pieces. All right. Let's talk about cool stuff we can do now. Let's talk about textures. You've seen my tiles that are done. These were all made with the red clay. And so all these different examples have little tiny pieces that have been attached to the surface. And so you can't see very much of that flat, smooth surface that we see here. So let's start making some cool stuff. The first technique I want to talk about is a coil. A coil is something that you have been making since you were a tiny child with Play-Doh. I would take a piece that's already kind of long and skinny, and then to make a coil, you roll it across the table. To make a coil longer, let me scooch. You start in the middle and then you roll your hands out, and that kind of stretches the clay, but you have to do that while you're rolling it. Awesome. Now, some things to be thinking about while you're making any of your textures. The more you touch the clay, the more the clay is going to want to dry out. When you're rolling out a coil, I wouldn't roll it as fast as you can. It tends to get warped. But once it's done, stop touching it. Set it off to the side over here. Some more tips. While you're working on making your textures and stuff, all these little extra pieces right here, they're just sitting here drying out. And that's not a great place to keep them. So while I'm working on these other textures, I'm just going to keep these guys right inside my bag so that they are not drying out, and I can continue to work on my tile right here. Okay, so here I've got this long coil, and I've got my designs all drawn out. I wanted to put the coils inside of this area right here, and so I'm going to measure out exactly how long my coils need to be. Remember, these are my three main tools that I'm going to be working with. The skewer tool can be used to do pretty much anything, so that's about how long this coil needs to be. And so I can cut it with anything. I can cut it with my skewer, I can chop it with the side of this credit card, I can even use the fork. Cutting things is pretty easy with pretty much any tool. Now I need to attach this coil to the surface of my tile. You cannot just set it on there and squish it. We have to fire these in the kiln. That means that you're going to bring it back to school. We're going to load them all up into this machine that we have that's going to fire them up to a temperature around 3,000 degrees. That's really hot. When it's 3,000 degrees, that means that the pieces are going to be like almost liquid in there. And so if you don't attach your pieces very well, they will just pop right off. So they'll just pop right off. Another issue is that if you have any air bubbles in your clay at all, then those air bubbles are going to pop in the kiln. And so we want to try to make sure we don't have any air bubbles and that we have attached our pieces really well. So my people at home, you should get a little bit of water to keep next to you. Now, to attach your pieces, the first thing you have to do is score. The word score means to scratch. And so to scratch into the surface of the clay here, you can use any tool, but I cut this credit card just like this to be able to scratch into the surface of the clay really easily. When I am scratching into the surface here, scoring this piece of clay, again, I can use any of these things. Here's me using them all. I want to scratch into the entire part of the surface of the clay that is going to be stuck onto the other part. And I also need to score the place where it's going to attach. What this is doing is it's giving us more surface area. We're increasing the surface area. Instead of two pieces attaching like this, we are scratching up the surface so that the pieces lock together. That's our goal here. Now, before we can stick them on though, you need some water. Okay, so put plenty of water on all of the little places where you scored. It should fill in all those little lines that you scratched into the surface. Both pieces need water. And then you're going to set it on top and then squish it into the surface. You want to squish those two pieces together. After you squish those pieces together, then you can use a tool or you can use your finger to clean up along the edge. Clean up along the edge to get any extra squish out. There we go. And that is going to make sure that our piece is really well attached. Here's my other piece. I'm going to attach this one right here. It's actually the perfect size. That's pretty cool. So that's how you make coils, and that's how you attach coils. My next one's going to go here. But let's talk about some other cool stuff you can make. So you can make pretty much anything. You can squish your pieces together to make interesting forms and shapes, but whatever you make, you have to remember that you've got to score the little piece that you make. You have to score the area where you're going to attach it. Get some water. Put water onto both parts, and then when you set it on there, you have to go back and really squeeze it onto the surface. Squish it on there. Squish. And now I'm going to go in and clean it up along the edges. So use whatever tools you've got, but make sure that you are putting water in between and squishing it on there, so that you don't end up with air bubbles and so that your pieces are attached really well so that they're not going to pop off in the kiln. So far I have added 2 things. This is not 2 textures. To be a texture, it needs multiples of the same thing, repeating. It's like a pattern. So here I have rolled my clay into a little sphere. If I keep messing with it and I keep touching it and I keep rolling it, it's going to dry more and more and more the more I touch it. So as soon as you're done making something like this, set it aside. Let it be. So I'm not even going to use that piece because it's too dry. So as soon as you've made it, set it off to the side. Don't touch it too much. Now these little spheres right here are tricky because they dry out so fast. I might even stick your finger in some water and put a little bit of water on it while you're waiting. And we need to score and slip really good because they're round on the bottom, not flat. So they already have less surface area. So I scratch there, water, water. So your little spheres, you really want to squish them on there. Bam. Clean up around the edges so that it looks more round than it did. I have now attached 3 objects to the surface of my tile. To make these into patterns, I now need to go and make more of the same thing and repeat them all over the place. Keep your extra pieces in your bag while you're working so that they don't dry out too much. And don't forget to score the surface and then add water so that your pieces will stick really well into the surface of your clay. Again, this is called scoring right here. Water on both. And then really squish it into the surface. Squish, squish, squish. Clean it up along the edge. That also helps to make it stick. Weld that edge. Awesome. Now, everything that you're doing right now is pretty squishy. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about things you can do that are cool once it's not so wiggly and bendy and squishy. Once it starts to dry out a little bit more, there are other things you can do that are pretty fun. So keep making textures and adding textures to your surface. Don't forget to use whatever tool you have to score and then to use some water to help squish the pieces on.